This latest chapter of My Hero Academia would open up with what is now my favorite Shoto image of all time. With it, we now know exactly what Shoto looks like during his super move state, and I love it. A portion of his flames have now become blue like his brothers, but more so due to a chilling effect. And even more than that, his hair standing up looks to be on account of the white portion being jagged like glacial peaks, while the red becomes especially fiery. It is brilliant. Dabi's defeat and the next stage of My Hero Academia's final arc are here. With a look of exhaustion and relief, Shoto stood the victor, holding an unconscious and defeated Dabi. The older brother, Born Toya, had an unrecognizable look as it was announced by Burnin to all heroes in the battlefield that Shoto, the younger brother, had officially won. The other heroes on the battlefield would acknowledge Shoto's success. They knew they had to do their part and defeat the intimidating Nomu that remained. They had the numbers advantage and intended to make the most of it. After all, they considered themselves lucky. Lucky that they were dealing with this battlefield instead of facing the Tartarus escapees, such as Kunieda and Ghastly, alluding to some pretty notorious villains we have never once heard of throughout the entirety of the story. These are the sorts of things I really wish could have been fleshed out more previously, as I do feel this world of My Hero Academia has a lot of explorative potential, but oh well. No use crying over spilt milk, right? But before we go any further, incredibly enough, this video is sponsored by the official My Hero Academia collectible card game. They have just recently released their latest set, Crimson Rampage, and it really just goes above and beyond to elevate the fun that much more. As a fan of card collection myself, I'm really excited to tell you guys about it. They've got plenty of your favorite heroes and villains, and more continue to arrive with each expansion of the game. This is easily one of the best ways to support the series that we all love and take things even further beyond. Plus Ultra. The organized play season has begun, and by joining the UGN Play app, you can enter tournaments for the chance to win rare alternate art cards and Nintendo Switch consoles, all leading up to the championship event at the end of the year with a prize pool of $250,000. That is $250,000. Links will be in the description for you guys to pick up your very own My Hero Academia Crimson Rampage cards and to join in on the fun with their tournaments. Thanks again to our friends, the My Hero Academia collectible card game, for sponsoring the video. But now, back to the latest My Hero Academia chapter. The news of Dabi's defeat would reach the center of operations where Tsukauchi and All Might were. All Might here looked restless, but upon hearing the news, he felt a very visible wave of relief, now knowing the battle was going in their favor. But even beyond that, this revelation made him very emotional as well, likely imagining the pain Shoto went through to end that fight with his own brother. Despite Deku being sent to the wrong location, things were off to a good start. And with that, All Might would be told that he has to be the one to make the announcement that Shoto has won the fight. The chapter then takes us to the ruins of Jaku General Hospital, and if you forgot, during the first war, this is the location in which Shigaraki woke up from his slumber and decayed everything. It would be here that we would see Mina, Mineta, Kodai, Yanagi, and Honenuki. Now, on account of this announcement, Mao Lady would acknowledge Shoto's victory, saying that she worried about him because of his quirk difficulties. Saying this as she stomped and dominated the villains in the surrounding area. And these villains were terrified, and who can blame them? At least right now, it looks as though the heroes are dominating this war. But suddenly, we would then see the villain who killed Midnight during the first war appear. He'd call out the heroes for seemingly faking their weakness, however, in the end, he made it clear that this would be futile. To end his speech off, he would take a direct shot at them, stating that they would burn in the ground like that UA teacher, referring to Midnight. Mina caught that and was visibly surprised to hear it, and that shot of her right there is 10 out of 10. It's been years and I'm still not done appreciating how great Horikoshi's art style is. Mina would be snapped out of that moment though by the arrival of Red Riot, Kirishima. Here our boy would announce that the area was evacuated and that now was the time to go to work. I really love this duo so much, and I think we can all agree that whatever they do from here will be epic. The sheer fact that they're the ones fighting here right outside of where Giganto Maki is being detained is incredible considering their shared history. The villain that killed Midnight isn't especially interesting to me just yet or anything, but hey, at least they have their own personal stakes in this conflict. That can't be said for everyone. They were inspired by Shoto's win just like everyone else, and it was time to use that energy. It's interesting to see that previously unknown villain come back now and have a big role in the end. It looks like Horikoshi wanted to create some more connections, and hey, mission accomplished there, I guess. Up next was the battlefield at Takoba Stadium. Here we would see Sato, Sero, and Ojiro also reacting to Shoto's win. And right after that, we would get a shot of the UA school building in the sky. Bakugo would be the one present in the UA shot, stating with a big smile that of course Shoto won. Kunieda would be the next enemy shown in this chapter, and he would be face to face with Fat Gum and Oyama at the location where all this began. He would analyze the hero strategy to split up the villains, matching them with heroes with capable quirks. However, he'd have to wonder why they remained here with him. And with a calm demeanor, he would furthermore inquire as to whether or not this was trust or blind faith. Fat Gum and Oyama weren't entertaining him too much, and Kunieda would reveal a final bit of information here. Dictator was actually replaced by him, and so Kunieda was All for One's latest assassin. Oyama here would get lightly roasted for seemingly trying to juggle both sides, but with a badass expression he'd simply say, "Mercy." Elsewhere, President Mike would loudly echo Shoto's victory to everyone around. Shoji was proud of his friend Shoto for looking his cruel destiny in the face and never wavering, all while a supersized Spinner would hulk out, attempting to assail him and Koda with his blade cluster sword. With the verbal declaration to the collective masses that Dabi lost, Spinner refused to believe the heroes whom he presumed to be spreading propaganda for the sake of a morale boost. All the while, Spinner was pretty much foaming at the mouth here with aggression. As from there, we would flash back to Dabi walking away from Spinner and All for One, who at that height looks like he might need to lace up and get to hoopin' if this world domination thing doesn't work out. Here, Spinner would think to himself that Dabi has everything, the very words repeatedly expressed in regards to these children of Endeavor, Toya, and Shoto. He admired Dabi as someone with a purpose and goal in life, someone with power. Meanwhile, he himself felt he had nothing that could compare, as the opportunistic, heinous hands of All for One would diabolically caress the front of his face. And just like that, we now know the source behind Spinner's gigantification. He's been bestowed additional quirks by All for One, similarly to Giganto Machia, for the sake of truly being this larger-than-life symbol for those of heteromorphic visages, therefore bestowing onto him not only power, but a purpose and goal, the likes of which makes the fact that these heteromorphic students are the ones to face him that much more intriguing. This also seems to express the notion that Dabi refused such providence from All for One, which will be important for later, so keep that in mind. Ultimately, Dabi desired to vanquish his father by way of the very flames he was cursed to bear. But again, Spinner would rebuke the notion of his comrade Dabi having been defeated, instead having complete and utter faith in him. From which point, Spinner would command his legion of heteromorphs to retrieve Kurogiri from his captors and dismantle the status quo. Very big words from the now very big Spinner. And you know what, with this presented objective of theirs, I honestly expect Spinner to win here, at least to the point of supposedly liberating the detained Kurogiri, from which point, the Warp Gate user will have the freedom to do as he so pleases. And considering we now know him to at his core be Shirakumo, along with the fact that he hasn't awoken from his slumber since revealing the location of Dr. Garaki's lab beneath Jaku General Hospital prior to the First War, I'd imagine he has been in the midst of an inner turmoil for quite some time now, and will finally have the opportunity to either emerge as a hero or as a villain. And if you're familiar with our previous series, then you'll know we expect him to be a hero once again. Shouting at the top of his lungs, Spinner would urge his forces to complete this righteous task for his and Shigaraki's sake, fully leaning into his new messiah-like role. It was up to the downtrodden folks to take power into their own hands and tear down everything that oppressed and persecuted them. And you know what, I must say, Horikoshi in mere moments has successfully invested me in the furtherance of Spinner's story. Truly, these heteromorphs have more of a reason than most to side with the villains, as once crisis struck and the country went into a state of anarchy, many of them were falsely villainized and targeted anyways, simply based on their outwardly appearances. And I've said something similar before, but even now, I'm not sure if this is the subject matter Horikoshi is truly prepared to properly tackle. But I sure hope he is, and I will be following these developments very closely. But to close out this ever fascinating scene would be the internal thoughts of Shoji, expressing that he is proud to be in the same class as Shoto. And I'd imagine that over the course of this bout, the entirety of Shoji's face will be revealed. And if I were to make a wild guess, considering Horikoshi's obsession with bodily scars, coupled by the emphasis on his appreciation of Shoto's efforts, the lower portion of Shoji's face will be heavily scarred, revealing a tragic past of sorts on account of his own experiences with heteromorphic persecution, essentially providing the narrative of issuing change from within the system as opposed to outside of it to, quote, do it the right way. Because truly, the only way to defeat and or kill a symbol, an intangible concoction compounded by the projections of man, is by way of another to take its place. And historically, that tends to be weaponized against the downtrodden, so again, I'm somewhat concerned by the handling of this. Now, this next part is a bit scary. Literally, this could change everything we know about Dabi. Shoto would now be closer to Ida and would apologize for freezing over his engine. Ida, being a true friend, would shut that down and look over his classmate. But then, like the Grim Reaper himself trying to bring a body to the other side, a hero would check Dabi's vitals for life and be surprised to find out Dabi was not dead. His chest from the center was now beginning to glow, Oh my goodness, what is happening? Dabi has a history of surviving against all odds, and it looks like despite the mass declaration, this time may be no different. Like we pointed out on Twitter, this scene here is very reminiscent of X-Less checking Shigaraki's vitals and being killed on the spot. Now Dabi, as we saw, refused All For One's quirk-based advances, but then again, he was experimented upon by the doctor as a child, so who knows if a happy surprise may have been installed in him as well. Or perhaps this is merely the natural evolution of his quirk. And let me just say that if Dabi turns out to have ice powers as well, you best believe we are going to be partying like crazy over here on Plot Armor. The news of Dabi's defeat would then reach Endeavor, who had an emotional look that he was in a way repressing. As if he wanted to react more, but in the face of his enemy, he held it together. And it's because of this that All For One would continue his mind games, questioning Endeavor's expression. Was it relief? Sorrow? But Hawks would be wise enough to tell Endeavor to ignore this, which I need to express to you all is important. You have to recognize that All For One, even if you took away his quirks, is still a very dangerous villain. The ways in which he constructs his assembly of words, the ways in which he is able to invoke certain emotions out of people, it may as well be considered a superpower in and of itself. All For One would then keep on going as Endeavor looked on, stating that leaving Shota to fight Toya and not even facing his own villainous son was his own idea. In All For One's mind, basically hiding from the problem and justifying it by saying some generic statement about heroics. And you know what guys, we got an official My Hero Academia sponsorship, so I'm feeling generous. Here's another bold expectation. Shoto, despite doing as incredibly as he has, will begin to fail against whatever is to come from Dabi. And this time, in refusal of the man he once was, Endeavor will deviate from the plan, letting the words of All For One get to him, as of course Endeavor is historically a very insecure man, effectively turning his back on his job to instead prioritize his family, protect Shoto, and face Toya. The very things he should have done for his sons a very long time ago. What they expected him to do, but failed to as a terrible parent. And with that, there will be no keeping All For One at bay, and the narrative of the war going swimmingly will drastically turn for the worst. And speaking of All For One, he would end this statement by saying that this was why Endeavor cannot be number one. Saying this as he coalesced a different quirk in each finger across his hand. On his pinky would have the recognizable spike protrusions he'd used against All Might during their final fight. On his ring finger would be flames. On his middle finger would be what I imagine to be like wind blades. On his index would be a sickening expulsion of warped flesh like that of a Beherit from Berserk. And lastly on his thumb, a sort of sludge that may be his somewhat limited warp quirk. Now the one on his index finger in particular intrigues me the most, as I presume this may be the very quirk he used in excess to kill All Might's master and Shigaraki's grandmother, the late Shimura Nana, as several fleshy constructs like this fill the space during the All Might Rising OVA. And with all this being the case, I am really ready for this war to take a terrible turn. Because after all, what is a war without fear and mayhem? As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.